Hello, small group leaders. It's Pastor Jeremy talking to you through time travel. I recorded this for you before I left on my sabbatical this summer, and I wanted to stay in touch with you, give you encouragement and support as you're leading your groups this summer. I know some of you choose to continue to meet on a regular basis during the summer. Some of you take little breaks or do just a once a month meeting instead of doing multiple times a month. All of that is great. I would encourage you to keep doing everything you can to connect with your group over the summer as we head into the fall. You'll get another one of these videos later in the fall or toward the time when I'm coming back in August that will help us as we ramp up towards really encouraging people to join a group this fall. I'd love for us to see our groups thriving and growing and expanding and new groups being birthed, just so that we can continue to connect with people at the church to build community and to help people get the support they need in congregational care, as we talked about in our small group leaders gathering earlier this year. So today I want to talk to you really quick, just to remind you about the focus of our groups and help you hopefully along the way. You will remember there are 5 main purposes of the church according to the purpose-driven life information that we covered from the Saddleback Church and specifically Saddleback's small groups efforts. They focus on 5 areas of the church. And those 5 areas, if you have your notes from our gathering, you'll be able to look at these. The first one is fellowship, that is building community. And so I just want to give you a thought on each one of these things. Fellowship, of course, building community is one of the basic main areas that we can build on when we're leading our small group. And so the question to you today is, how are you building community in your small group? You can't take it for granted, because community isn't something that just happens. We have to be intentional about the way we meet together. We have to be intentional about the activities we do together. And we have to be intentional about the way we care for one another in order to build authentic community. Otherwise, we might as well just be a social gathering, a club, even a class sometimes is that way. It doesn't include real authentic community. You might be learning things, you might be spending time together, but if you're not really building community, then there's something missing. So how are you building community through fellowship in your small group? Well, there are a lot of ways to do this. One of the main ways that I see our groups doing this is by sharing a meal together. You'll remember from the Bless series earlier this year that eating together is a huge way to connect you with other people. And so if you're not doing that on a regular basis, that's fine. But I want to encourage you this summer maybe to schedule a time when your group can get together and eat together and share a meal, because sharing that meal is an opportunity to talk about life together and to build community with one another. Another great way that you can build community through fellowship is actually by taking on a project or a goal together. Later on this list, serving is one of the main 5 purposes of the church, and so serving is a great way to actually build community. And that happens among these 5 purposes of the church. You'll find that they interact with each other and they build each other up. So serving is a great way to pour into community. When you serve together, when you come up with a project you can do together, whether that's collecting items to give away or meeting at someone's home and helping them with a project, somebody outside the church, one of your neighbors might have a need that you can meet. This is a great way for you to serve together and also build community at the same time. The second of the 5 purposes of the church from the Saddleback material is the discipleship area. And of course, we all want discipleship. We want discipleship to happen in our groups. We want it to happen in our church. Small groups is a great place for discipleship to happen. Of are you encouraging discipleship in your group? Well, of course, one of the main ways we do that is by what we study together. So some of our groups do sermon discussion guides, sermon discussion questions, and go over what was covered in the worship service. And some of our groups don't do that. They choose other study materials to do together. But no matter which one you choose, you want to make sure that it is not too superficial of a discussion. Just talking about your favorite point from the sermon, for instance, isn't necessarily including or engendering discipleship among people. It may just be kind of recalling things that you heard, which, much like when we cram for an exam in high school, we can spit the facts back out, but if they didn't really take up residence in our minds and become applied to anything, then they aren't necessarily going to stick with us, and they aren't necessarily going to make any difference in the way we think. So bringing up points from the sermon is a great place to start, but then go further than that. Ask a question about, why did you like that thing? What in your life really relates to that point that you remembered from Pastor Joel's sermon or whoever was speaking that day? And how do you apply that to your life today and tomorrow? How does it stick with you? How do you live that out? That's a great way to encourage discipleship among people, so that we aren't just hearing information, letting it go in one ear and out the other, but we're actually learning to apply it to our life and become transformed to be more like Jesus Christ. So that can happen whether or not you're talking about the sermon or whether you're talking about another study material. The third area I mentioned before, the third purpose of the church is ministry, and that is serving. So how are you encouraging ministry? How are you serving among your small group? One way, as I mentioned earlier, is to come up with projects, ministry projects you can do together, maybe ministering to a neighbor, or maybe you take on a task for the church and you say, we would like to be a team that hosts an event for the church and helps us reach our neighbors or helps us complete some task. We have Vacation Bible School this June, so maybe you have people in your group that you can encourage to serve in that way, or maybe your entire small group can commit to serving and helping with Vacation Bible School. That might be a great project for you. You can also serve in Water Street Rescue Mission, our local ministry partners like Ray's Youth Center or Echoes in Elizabethtown, the shelter there. These are great ways for your group to get plugged in and serve together. But of course, the basic level of serving is what happens in the church building. So if your team is made up of people, if your group is made up of people who don't currently have a place on a serve team among the church ministry as it happens from week to week, then maybe you can have a discussion about that in your small group and say, where is it that you serve? What do you like about that? Maybe you're on the worship team, or maybe you're a teacher for kids in the Next Steps hour. What do you like about that? What is challenging about that? And would you recommend that to other people? And maybe other people in your circle, in your group, will be encouraged to sign on and to become part of contributing to the ministry of the church as a whole. Because that's why we do this. It's never about putting warm bodies into an area of ministry. It is always about, let's serve for the greater purpose of what God has called us to do as a church. Our mission of enjoying God and loving each other and blessing our neighbors, all of that is what we contribute to when we serve. So our small groups can be an encouragement to each other to serve in pursuit of that mission. And then the fourth area of the purpose of the church is evangelism and sharing our faith journey with other people. Now, we know that happens in two ways. Evangelism really happens, number one, by the way that we speak, and number two, by the way that we live. And those things have to match up together, right? Just recently, we heard from Ash and Heather Holloman in our worship service about living a sent life, walking into a room, even a place we don't want to be, like the Department of Motor Vehicles, and saying, okay, God, where do you have an opportunity for me to connect with someone and maybe introduce them to Jesus? I might be here even suffering in this place because you want me to help somebody else come to know who you are. So we have to go into those environments with that idea, that mindset in place of living a sent life. And evangelism is what happens when we live that way. Evangelism is in the things we say. It's in the way that we act. It's in the choices that we make. Now, in small group settings, we can do that together by engaging with the community. So perhaps, like I said earlier, if there's a mission project, local mission, or a neighbor who has a project to do, those are great opportunities for us to be thinking evangelistically. It doesn't mean we pull a tract out of our pocket or we have a 5-point presentation that we're going to take somebody through. What it means is we're going to ask those questions like Heather Holloman talked about, to find out what's important to these people that we're meeting, that we're in front of today, and how does my life of faith intersect with their life. I took a practical theology class earlier this year as part of my master's degree studies, and I loved the question that I was asked there: how does my faith affect my neighbor? And that's what evangelism is all about. That's what I think about when I'm out dealing with people that I might have just met for the first time. I'm interacting with new people and I'm thinking, how does my faith affect the people around me? So that it's not just internal for me, it's not just what I think about, but it's also how I act, how I live, and it comes out in all the things I say. So we can encourage each other in our small groups to be doing that, and we can have opportunities to do it together whenever we're doing group activities. So I want to encourage you in that too. And lastly, the fifth purpose on the list is worship, honoring God together. And so if worship is an area that you haven't incorporated into your small group, I would invite you to try it. Even if you don't have anyone in the group who sings or plays an instrument, music is not the only form of worship that there is. There's worship by giving, there's worship through prayer, there's worship by writing poetry or painting a picture or doing something else creative that expresses who God is, and we give to him his worth through worship. Worship is also an everyday decision in the way that we live things out in our lives, the way that we make decisions. When we do things, we do them to give honor to God and not to be selfish for us. So worship is something that we can do in our groups, in how we encourage each other to grow through the discipleship we have. There's another combination there. Worship and discipleship go hand in hand. But we also can take those intentional opportunities to do something creative together in order to worship God. So perhaps there's somebody in your group who could lead you in some singing or lead you in an art project or poetry or some other creative thing that you could try together in order to worship God. If they're not already in your group, maybe reach out to somebody else in the church and invite them in as a guest for one of your group meetings and say, would you come and lead us in singing or help us with this art project or whatever project you have in mind. There are people throughout our church with excellent talents that we see expressed all the time that might be a great addition to just one of your group meetings so that you can have a creative worship time together. Okay, so fellowship, discipleship, ministry, evangelism, worship. How are you accomplishing these things in your group? How are you encouraging your group to grow in all these areas? I know that you can. I know that you're all wonderful people who love Jesus, and I believe in you and your ability to lead this group that you have meeting with you. I know some of you are meeting on a really regular basis. Even somebody's meeting every week. There's several meeting every other week. There's somebody meeting once a month. But throughout this summer, I want to encourage you to put the Lord's work in us first by intentionally pouring into your group in these 5 areas and encouraging them to grow. And then I look forward to talking with you again next time about how we can ramp up to an even more exciting and vibrant small group ministry this fall. So thanks for taking the time to watch along. I look forward to seeing you again real soon when my sabbatical is over, and I hope you have a wonderful summer full of God's blessings and a great time with your small group.